the Alpha 1 Generation 2 water pump. So what we've got is our housing. I've cleaned that all out nicely. What I do is I take a little bit of grease, just a tiny amount, and just smear it around the inside. Just helps the first start, also helps put it in. So we just do that, turn it, until it's in. There we go. And then I'll set the slot for the key just to one side. Okay, and then push it so that the hole is in the centre. You'll see the hole in the centre of the water pump, or it's not in the centre. It's just offset, and that's so that you get one side larger than the other, and that's actually what pumps the water when we're in displacement mode. When the engine gets running a bit quicker, these blades fold in, and then we go into centrifugal mode. So that's sorted. The plate has been cleaned, both sides. As I said, we're going to be reusing this plate. The small amount of grooving there, I can't justify replacing that. So that goes on like that, and then that will go on like that. Now what we've got is a couple of alignment pins. A lot of people are saying, oh, you don't need the alignment pins, you don't need the alignment pins. I'm sorry, you do need the alignment pins. So we thread these into the holes. Now I've already chased these holes with a tap, and they are an M6, they're a metric, which surprised me a little bit. So we set those up. Now the reason for the pins is that they will put the gaskets, the plate and the housing in exactly the right place. Now if it's not in the right place, it's going to cause a problem, and I'll show you what that problem is. Okay, we drop the gasket and the plates. We'll do it one at a time. Okay, so the other two holes that want to be done on this one. You can see that if you have a look at the plate very carefully, that hole is these two holes, slightly smaller than those two. So pins are in the wrong place. But what can happen is you can see that these are the screws that are going to be holding it all together. There's quite a bit of clearance there. And the same with the housing. And what can happen is when you put it on like that, if that's not in the right place, we can see that it can move around quite a bit. So you're going to get a less efficient water pump, but also the edge of the housing there is going to be touching the drive shaft. So what you're going to end up with is a big groove in the drive shaft and a worn piece in the housing, and that's going to lead to air being sucked in, the water pump being less efficient, and your engine possibly overheating. So we'll put the pins in the right place. We'll get it right one day. There we go, third time's a charm. Plate down, gasket down. You can see there that that's lined up. There's tiny bit of movement, nothing significant. Now the other trick I use is we take our key, and again we put a little bit of grease on it, just on the back of the pin, like that, so that it sticks to the shaft. That's it. It's stuck there. It's not going to come off. We set that up, and then I'll be running the impeller down so that the groove there runs into the key. Again, we line up our pins, and then get in there. I hope you can see this against the sunlight at the back. And we just turn that until the pin lines up. on the shaft. Most of the time it goes on first time, like that. Okay, so that's there. And we can see there, if we have a look at the top, we can see that the shaft is perfectly centred in the housing, so it's not going to touch. So here's our bolts. They've been cleaned up, and I've got some of my special AquaShield grease on them, and we'll put 2 of those into the opposite sides, and we'll run those down. Gently. Once we're happy that it's square, just put a little bit more torque on them. And we take the pins out. Now that shaft is aligned perfectly in the centre. And we put our other 2 screws in. And check the torque on these. That's all good. So that's the water pump, basically reassembled. There's only one other task to do, and that is to set the seal. When you buy a new water pump impeller or a kit, it will come with a new seal. It will also come with a seal installing tool. And the way we work with that, we just put it over like that. We run that down until it's touching the top of the water pump, and we lift up on the shaft. Then we remove the tool, and that's it, it's finished. The seal is set on the top of the water pump at the correct height as determined by using the tool, and we're now ready to put the drive shaft housing back onto the gear housing. When we do that, we just make sure that we obviously line up with the splines. Unlike an earlier MC1 through to Alpha 1 drive, the top of the splines do not need to be greased, because in the Gen 2s, the splines are oil bathed in the bottom of the upper drive shaft. The other thing we've got to watch is the alignment of the water pump outlet in here. Now this is the drive shaft housing down here. And this is the top of that's the water tube. You can take that out and clean it. And that sits on the top of there. That is a guide for the tube when you're assembling the halves. There's also a couple of O-rings in here. Just check that there's no grooving or no damage on them. You'll feel it with your finger. Set the coupling there. Clean the tube. It's a plastic tube. Put the tube guide on. Put the plastic tube back into the bottom of the drive shaft housing. Yeah, there's plenty of oil around there. Have a visual inside for the seal. These Gen 2s, you can't replace the seal from the outside. So if the seal is damaged, it's a disassemble of the drive shaft housing. Also make sure that the plastic water dam is there. That surface is relatively clean. That's the passage for oil between the drive shaft housing and the gear housing. That's the other thing we do on the gear housing, is we make sure that that quad O-ring is sitting in place. If that's not there, we're going to get an oil leak. So this is ready to assemble. So all I do is I pick this up, and I can see the tubes and the water guides through the exhaust passage. I drop that down. Now most of the time you're going to get it stopping about there. And what that is the splines not matching up. So just give it a turn and you'll hear it drop on. Then you just bump it with your hands, bring that down, line it up, bump it with your hands, and then fit the screws back in. And again, plenty of grease on there so that when you want to disassemble it in a year when you're supposed to service them. Actually, the Gen 2s, the recommended service interval is 3 years or 300 hours. This one's 320 hours. Took me a bit longer than 3 years to get the 300 hours up. So yeah, we just put it back together and then fill it with oil, and we always fill from the bottom of the drive up to the top. We then put the vent screw in, the fill screw at the top and bottom. What I then do is take the drive off the stand, lay it on the floor, and then fill the cavity in here. Gen 2s have got a reservoir in the engine bay attached to the engine, and this airspace here above the oil vent hole needs to fill up with oil. And what will happen, you'll find over a period of time, you don't have to do it, and if you haven't got the time, you don't have to do it. But over time, that air will bubble up the reservoir line and you'll appear to be using oil. All that is this cavity filling with oil and purging the air out. So what I do is I lay it down on the side, take the vent screw out, and then fill that area. Then there's no air in it. And that is Alpha 1 Gen 2 water pump service complete.